The legacies of slavery are still with us today and have endured through the 19th and 20th century to the present moment. We might think, for example, of the struggle for African American voting rights, not just in the southern states, which is the main place that we can think about that civil rights movement through the 1960s, but also many of the northern states through the 1950s and 1960s continue to inhibit African American men and women's rights to vote, to participate in public. So there are legal struggles that continued well into the modern period. Another of slavery's legacies has to do with property ownership. In the years after the Civil War and well into the 20th century, local, state, and even in some instances, federal laws restricted African Americans' access to property, whether it was home ownership, whether it was business ownership, and we might even think of sort of abstract forms of property in the sense of education and employment and self-determination. There were many laws, for example, that sanctioned denying mortgages and home ownership to African American home buyers, or that sanctioned charging African American home buyers exceptionally high interest rates and requiring exceptionally high down payments when their white counterparts were not subjected to that kind of economic exploitation. And we see those processes continuing through the modern period. And I think we can very much think of that as a legacy of slavery, as an attempt to curb and control and restrict African Americans' access to property, African Americans' rights to be property owners, to be independent, self-determined citizens. Lastly, we can also think about the cultural legacies of slavery, the ways in which African Americans in the past, and to a lesser degree, but still in the present, are not automatically assumed to be intellectually sophisticated, culturally sophisticated, artistically gifted. And so we might think about the ways in which African American students are targeted in schools as discipline problems or are assumed not to be intelligent in comparison to their white counterparts. And so I think that we might think of as a lingering legacy of slavery, the assumption that African American intellect and culture is not valued or regarded on the same level as white Americans' culture and intellect and potential is valued.
If you think about the Constitution as a mechanism for the beginning of self-government, which is what it is, it really is a document that seeks to empower the American people to answer the fundamental questions of their time. I've said it many times, it doesn't resolve things, it forces us to resolve things. It's also going to make us realize that in the end, America will always be something of a disappointment, in that we have these lofty ideas, these great principles, some articulated in the Declaration of Independence, embodied in the Constitution and the amendments to the Constitution, and will probably always fall a little short. But what makes us special is we've got the ideals. We stand for something. America is an idea as much as it is a country. And that's what the Constitution does. That's what the Constitution does. And other countries have tried to find a way to do the same thing in the modern age. It makes it impossible to ignore the problem. And I think that says a great deal about the framers, the document, and frankly, the American people.